Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Alex from adventuretoeverycountry.com. Adventure to Every Country is a travel blog for people who wish to visit any or every country in the world. So you'll learn how to navigate 193 plus countries, what to do, how to navigate tricky logistical situations, and fund your adventure to every country in the world. So welcome Alex to the podcast.
Hi Vance, thank you for having me on today. It's good to be here. And yeah, hopefully I can tell you everything you want to know about, well, my journey to every country. I'm currently on 70 countries, so I'm not quite towards the end of my journey just yet. It's a long-term goal, this one. And I don't really have a time limit on it, maybe within the next 10 years or so. But if that doesn't happen, then so be it. But yeah, I'm not one of these people who just races through countries, ticking a box and then running on to the next one. I have spent a handful of days in some countries and I've spent several months in others. So yeah, you've just got to see how things go and yeah, hope for the best really.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking today we could make it a little bit of a masterclass on creating a strategy on how to visit every country in the world. Like I'm sure everyone, at least everyone who would listen to this podcast has probably considered it and said, I wonder if I could accomplish that in my lifetime. And so I thought on this podcast, we could kind of walk through some things to, a bit of a checklist, things to keep in mind, plan it, and see where we can get with that.
Yeah, so the two big things you need really, obviously time and money. Sounds obvious, but but it's not as easy, especially if you're someone who's living the standard life that most people live, which is where you go to college, uni, you get a job, you work 40 hours a week, you're sat in an office, and then you retire in your mid 60s, and that's that really. So if you want to go to every country, I think there are a few people who are trying to balance a normal 9 to 5 job with this sort of journey, but really you need to try and find other ways of doing it. So either save up a lot of money and then travel, and you can switch between either several months of hardcore work, long hours, making as much money as possible, or well, the goal is long term to work remotely. So you can just work from your laptop
Yeah,
wherever you are in the world. You can work and travel at the same time, but even that comes with its problems because not everywhere has great internet or any internet at all,
it's
really.
true.
I was in Easter Island
Yeah,
a couple of years. Sorry.
no, yeah. I was gonna say. I mean, I think a lot of the original guys that accomplished this mission and some of the most traveled people in the world, a lot of them sold a business or
Mm.
they have some sort of passive income. And I think all few, if any, are digital nomads in that sense of the word. I mean, maybe a lot of them document their journey and make some money from their, from their travel business essentially. But very few people who have been to every country in the world were, software developers or something or graphic designers and did it that way.
Yeah, you need you really need to make this your main focus if it's something that you're serious about doing. If you're more committed to family life at home, 9 to 5 career, then it's going to be very, very difficult to pull something like this off. So you really need to focus the majority of your resources purely into travel, how you're going to afford it, how you're going to do it.
And you're in Paraguay right now?
Yep, just came back to Paraguay a few days ago to start a 10-month trip around, well, a year-long trip around Latin America and maybe the Caribbean as well, because my girlfriend lives down here. So I came down to explore a bit more of Paraguay with her, dive into the local culture a bit more, and then we're going to go down and do lots of Latin America things that I didn't get a chance to do last time, like Patagonia, the Amazon, and also some highlights from before, such as, well, Machu Picchu. I think my internet's just dropped out there. Come on. There we go. Oh, are we back?
We are back.
Sorry, yeah, I think my internet just dropped out there a second.
Yeah. So I'll have to edit this, but so you're in Paraguay right now.
Yeah, so I've been here, well, a few days now. I came down to visit my girlfriend who's Paraguayan, and then we're going to be traveling around Latin America for the next year or so, maybe the Caribbean as well. We're planning to do some bucket list destinations that I didn't get the chance to do last time. So Galapagos, Patagonia, the Amazon, but also some places that I did explore before that my girlfriend would like to see, and also a few lesser visited places which are always good to visit. I mean, we were in Aregua the other day in Paraguay, which
Uh
is
huh.
a small city by the lake here.
Yep.
Paraguay itself doesn't really get many tourists because it doesn't have those major bucket list destinations that uh, Argentina or Peru do. But, okay.
Yo.
Hello, are we back?
Uh. Yep.
I'm just trying to find a place where I might be able to get a better connection now. Is this a bit better? Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Okay, hopefully it's a bit better here. Sorry about that. This hotel's not very good for Wi Fi.
Okay. Do you think you're gonna be good for 50 minutes?
Yeah, it should be. It's a little bit better down here near a reception. So it's in the room that it's not so good, but hopefully it'll work from here. Sorry about that.
No worries. So, Alex, I think you really caught my attention because you're currently in Paraguay, and so you kind of got into the Paraguay Twitter community a little bit. So you things started coming up on Twitter, and you were engaging in the discussions. What are you doing in Paraguay of all places?
Yeah, so it's well, my girlfriend's from Paraguay, so I came down here to see her, and she's going to show me around the country. It's my second time here because I first went during my first visit to Latin America in 2022, and but that was just more of a taster session, really. So I just spent a bit of time in Ascension, and then did a day trip to Aregua, which I also did again a couple of days ago. So that's a really nice place. Yeah, I think Paraguay is more of a place for the serious travellers who like to connect with the local culture a bit more because there's no bucket list destinations here. So you're not going to find a Machu Picchu or a Galapagos or anything spectacular like
Iguazu,
that.
you got Iguazu.
Iguazu, yeah. I mean, you've got that on the border pretty much. That's as close to Paraguay as most people will go, and few travellers actually come inside, and I'd say they're missing out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, definitely a funny coincidence that you're there, being a every country in the world guy, and so you're about to do a, I guess, 1 year tour of South America and the Caribbean.
Yeah, that's right. So we're planning to go to Argentina next month, head down to Ushuaia and see everything in Patagonia, maybe crossing across to Chile a few times to see the highlights there as well. And then after that, we'll be making our way around Latin America. So Bolivia, Peru, Brazil, and then hopefully every other country on the continent. Last time I was here, I didn't get to go to Venezuela, Guyana, or Suriname. So those ones are high on the bucket list this time. And then, yeah, we don't quite have the budget to go to every country in the Caribbean at this stage, but to go to a few islands would be good. And then back to Central America, where I went to every country last time, and it's a spectacular part of the world. I mean, you can see volcanoes erupting in Guatemala, jungles in Costa Rica, which has some of the best wildlife in the world. There's so many bucket list experiences in that part of the world, so I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, Latin America's got everything. It's super affordable for the most part, and it's a lot safer than people who haven't been here before will try and tell you it is really.
Hmm. And I assume from your accent, you're from maybe the UK.
Yeah, that's right. I come from the south of England, so a long way from here.
Okay, nice. I went to Plymouth of all places,
Oh yeah.
Plymouth, England, because you know the whole Plymouth Rock in the US, so I wanted to go to Plymouth, England.
Okay. That's actually the one part of England that I've never been close to, the southwest.
I guess that's Southwest. Cool. So a British guy, and you're finding Latin America to be safer than you had expected.
Yeah, as I say, it's my second time here. I went to Mexico, one way flight, February 22, and everyone was telling me, oh, Mexico, really dangerous, cartels, all that kind of thing, how scary. And you do hear all the horror stories. But the truth is, if you take sensible precautions, the cartels don't target tourists unless you interfere with their business. So if you're in the military, the police, or anything like that, then yes, you're a target for cartels or obviously rival cartels. But if you're just a tourist who comes to see the highlights, the ruins, the Mayan ruins, and Cancun and everything, then it's highly unlikely that you're going to face any problems. So there's really nothing to be scared of there. And it's the same across much of Latin America, really. You hear about scary street gangs in Honduras, El Salvador, Brazil, Colombia, paramilitaries. It sounds like a really scary place to be if if you're not familiar with the region. But the truth is, keep yourself to yourself. Don't flash the cash. Don't walk around with your phone out. Something which I very nearly learned the hard way when I was in Quito a couple of years back and had it snatched
Hmm.
out my hand. But I managed to get it back after a little scuffle, shall we say. That was certainly one of the lowlights of my travels around here. But it was also a massive learning curve. I learned that day you don't walk around with your phone out in the streets, even when it feels like it's not too dangerous. Quito did have a bit of a bad vibe when I first arrived, and it was
Hmm.
also the one place where I felt underprepared rather than overprepared in terms of safety. Everyone
Hmm.
told me Colombia is really bad. So when I went to Colombia, I had my guard up. I was wary of bad things happening, and nothing bad did happen. Colombia is an amazing country, lovely people, really, really good. You probably won't run into trouble there unless you go looking for it. But Ecuador at the time, I hadn't really heard many bad things about it. So I got a bit of surprise on my first day. Got a taxi from the airport straight to my hostel, and the staff were showing me around. And the lady said, "Don't go outside at this time." It wasn't even that dark; the sun was just beginning to set. She said, "If you can't even walk, she pointed to a shop and about a 20-second walk away, and she was like, "Don't even walk there at this time." And I started to realize, oh, keto's a little bit more scary than I thought. And
Hmm.
yeah, sure enough, I had my own experience a couple of days later. And yeah, Ecuador has gone downhill a bit since then, with obviously everything that happened earlier this year.
Hmm.
But for the most part, Latin America is safe. It's just important to take precautions. So don't flash the cash, dress down, dress like a local, and don't, yeah, make a fool of yourself, really. You should be fine.
Yeah, yeah, definitely makes sense. And so I want to know, so how are you funding all this? You said the time, the money, you're a younger guy, so I guess you got the time. How are you handling things from a money perspective?
So a lot of it came from savings to begin with. During COVID, I was locked in my bedroom for about a year and had to work from home there. And because I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't going out, saved quite a lot of money. And that's what funded my first trip to Latin America, 10 months, 2022. And then I tagged on a few
Nice.
things at the end of that. I went to the Middle East for a few weeks because we went to the World Cup in Qatar, which was spectacular, and then a few weeks in Europe as well. But obviously, the savings weren't going to last forever. So
Hmm.
eventually, I did manage to squeeze on an extra 3 months in Europe at the beginning of last year. But then the money was starting to run a little bit lower. So I started looking into jobs abroad, and I ended up working in South Korea as an English teacher for 9 months, which should have been a year, but things didn't entirely go to plan. So I left at the end of May, and that funded, well, that's given me a nice little cushion for this trip. It may not be enough to last the whole year,
So you're in
but
Paraguay just living off savings from teaching English in Korea.
for now, yes, but I'm also in a bit of a
Wow.
transition period because I've only just started to monetize my blog, and it is only earning pennies at the moment, which isn't going to be enough long term. But my goal is to work really hard on this, grow it, and hopefully get enough money out of that to fund more long term travels as time goes on.
Yeah. And what happens if you run out of money in the next year? Or are you 100% on your own blog, or are you going to get maybe some freelance stuff? Or you tell me what you have planned.
Yeah, so I haven't really looked too deeply into freelance stuff at the moment. It is something that's at the back of my head if I do need a bit of a cash injection, but also teaching English online. Korea was really a stepping stone into that. So a lot of places needed experience, and well, I've got that experience now from Korea. But also, my girlfriend teaches English online, and she said that they're looking for native teachers, and I tick that box. So that's another backup plan if things don't go to plan in terms of the blog making enough money to keep us going long term.
Okay, definitely makes sense. So, pretty old school way of accomplishing things is teach English and maintain a travel blog.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot harder to maintain a travel blog in 2024 because it's a lot more competitive. And also, Google keeps changing things around. So it makes it a lot trickier for us. And I know a lot of people have gone from earning fairly decent living from their blog to next to nothing since September and the first of a couple of helpful content updates, which haven't necessarily been helpful, but have destroyed quite a few small bloggers. So, yeah, I guess it is
Mhm.
a high risk field to get into, and there's a lot of work involved. It's something that you shouldn't really pursue unless you're really serious about doing this. For me, I was writing posts for 10 and a half months before I finally started to monetize it, just at the beginning of, well, last month. But it's a lot of work and there's a lot to learn. So blogging is only really for people who are serious about this kind of thing. I know there are people who go down the YouTube route. I don't really know much about that because it's not my kind of thing, but there are people who've had success doing that. Again, I think it's something that requires a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of effort, and you have to be okay with months and months and months of just churning out content without getting paid. And then you go into the second stage, really, which is where you go from not getting paid to getting paid very, very little. And then it takes a lot of time to get to that third stage where you're actually earning enough money to sustain yourself. So
Hmm.
yeah, the whole blogging route isn't for everyone. It sounds attractive from the outside. You make a website, you sit on a beach in the Caribbean or wherever, you write blog posts, great, you're living a dream. Yes, if you make it big, then you can do that, but it takes some serious effort to get to that stage, and not everyone will manage. So you do need to be committed if you go down that path. I would say that the teaching English route is a little bit more stable. I think wages have gradually gone down in recent years as more and more people have been doing this. And I think China used to be a big place to teach English, and they've
Right.
changed their rules to make it a bit trickier now for people to teach from
Really? How
anywhere in the
so?
world. Uh,
How so? What changed with that?
I did hear it was something along the lines of that Chinese companies used to dominate the market, but now they look more for teachers that are on the ground in China. So
Mm.
it's a lot harder to get Chinese jobs from elsewhere in the world. I mean, I'm not an expert on teaching English in China, so it may still be possible, but from everything I've heard from people in the teaching English community, it is a lot trickier than it used to be. But there are still chances out there. I think teaching English is still one of the easier routes in. You've just got to accept that you're not going to become a millionaire from doing this, and you're going to have to, well, travel on a budget really, and hope that you can maybe move up to a point where you're ready to set up your own language institution, and that
Hmm.
can bring in a bit more money. But again, that's not something where you're going to get mega rich off that. So I think it is possible to travel whilst working, but you've also got to be prepared to not earn much money for a long time. And yeah, unless you have some real skill like programming or something along those lines, that's the sort of thing where you'll make a bit more money than teaching English.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was even. I almost forgot that it was a viable option. But I love that you're doing it in such a simplistic way. It's just, yeah, teach English. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I mean, people still need to learn English in 2024, and there are people willing to pay for private lessons. So that makes sense.
Yeah, so teaching English in East Asia, especially, it's a really big deal. When I was in Korea, the Korean mums were really obsessed with the idea of having a native English teacher because
Uh-huh.
it's all about image in Korea. It doesn't matter how well something functions, it matters how well it looks. That's the important thing for them. So, as long as they have a British or American or Canadian face or an Australian, there's 7 countries that they pick teachers from. That's the main thing for them. And to be honest, most of us aren't even proper qualified teachers. We'll do an online TEFL qualification, that's teaching English as a foreign language. And that's the only teaching experience you need to get a
That's all
job
you
like
need.
this.
I love
Yeah.
it. That's all you need. Okay. And what could someone expect to earn per month as an English teacher?
So it really depends on the country and where you go. Uh, Korea is certainly one of the better places for beginners because you get free accommodation included. I think that's a legal thing. So if a Korean school offers you a job, they also have to give you accommodation as well. So you pay nothing on accommodation. You'll generally be within about a 20-minute walk of the school. So you
Hmm.
don't really have to pay much on transport either. For me, it was walking distance, and that will be the case for most people doing this. Food and drink is not too expensive in Korea. It's a little bit more pricey than Paraguay, but cheaper than the UK. Well, a lot cheaper, really. Fruits and meats are more expensive, but everything else is relatively affordable. But
Mm.
Korea, you can earn about, what did I earn? About 1,000 to 400 a month. I can't remember off the top of my head now, but it was around that.
Okay, so US, so 1200 US with accommodations paid for.
Yeah. So the
And then you
accommodation being
spend, I
paid
don't
for.
know, 300 $300 a month on food and maybe. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Crema Social. Crema Social is like TikTok for international dating. It's an app you can download right now on your phone, and 3 out of 4 people on Crema are single women. The app was founded in Colombia, so unsurprisingly, there are a lot of Latinas on the app, by the way. So, how does it work? Crema Social is a social meal experience where you invite a hot girl for a lunch date via video call and food delivery. New concept, so you'll have to try it out for yourself, but this is probably the best way to meet Latinas before you visit the country. So if you're in Latin America or planning to visit Latin America, download Crema Social now and start getting dates right away. There will be a link in the description to download, or just search Crema Social on your favorite app store. Have fun, guys. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Bit Refill. Bit Refill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Job Stacking. If you are a remote or hybrid worker looking to maximize your earning potential, then Rolf Holtze, the author of Job Stacking, guarantees you'll be able to double your income. This is the exact system Rolf has used to take his own income and those of many others beyond 20K a month. So what is job stacking? It's this idea of working multiple remote jobs. You might have heard Rolf, he's worked 5, 7, even 9 remote jobs at the same time before. And by the way, job stacking works equally well for non-technical roles. So no, it's not just for the nerds. So if you're ready to job stack, then book a discovery call with Job Stacking and see how they can double your income in just 9 weeks. In the show notes in the description, there will be a link where you can book a call directly on the Calendly of Job Stacking and be talking with them as early as tomorrow about how to double your income as quickly as possible. You get away with saving $800 a month or something.
Yeah, you can save a little bit more than that, really. Yeah, I maybe spend in dollars, as you say, about 300 a month. Probably saved about 1,000 a month on average. I also didn't mention that schools will generally also pay for your flight. And if you
Nice.
complete your contract, then they will often pay for a return flight. Not always, so you do have
Nice.
to look for that in the contract. And you will also get 1 month severance pay if you complete the contract. So that's the
Nice.
equivalent to 1 month's wages. I was lucky because you're not meant to get it if you work for under a year, but I managed to get 3/4 of my severance pay for working 3/4 of the contract. So that worked out well, even though I wasn't entitled to that. And I mean, there are pitfalls in Korea. I worked at a hagwon, which are notorious for screwing teachers over, really. And they do all sorts of dodgy things with their foreign teachers. So it's basically to make as much money as possible. And that will often include screwing you on tax, things like that. They'll take things out your salary that they're not supposed to. They'll underpay the
Mm.
government. So you can get in a lot of trouble if you don't notice these things and you don't pick up on it. And it wasn't just me who had this experience in South Korea. If you do work for a hagwon, it's a fairly common experience. So I would say if you teach English in Korea, go for the EPIC program. That's the government program. So that's a bit
Hmm.
more legitimate. They play more by the rules there. They do things legally 99% of the time. Whereas the Hagwons, yeah, if you look up Hagwon horror stories, you'll see quite a few of them from many people who've had much worse experiences than me. It generally starts okay with a bit of honeymoon periods. They try and make you
Hmm.
feel really welcome. But yeah, as time goes on, you'll find a lot of difficulties. Just going back to what you said earlier about how much you can earn as an English teacher, so Korea is one of the best beginner spots. But if you've got a couple of years experience under your belt, then the Middle East is where the real money's at. Dubai, Saudi
Mm,
Arabia, other
that makes
parts of the
sense.
UAE, and then yeah,
And but you
obviously
can do
this.
this remotely, right? As well, because not everyone's down to move to South Korea. Obviously,
Mm,
it's a cool experience, like, and I'm sure a lot of
yeah,
kids would do it. Like, I'm sure a lot of people would be down. But if you want to go to every country in the world, we're gonna have to do this remotely.
yeah. I think I signed up for a 1 year contract. That's a bit long if you're going to travel to every country. I mean, it was good for savings, but you are stuck in one place. The one thing I would say was that it gave me a base, so I was able to explore Taiwan, Japan, and then at the end I went to Mongolia and China before coming home. So I was able to
Mhm.
see most of East Asia that I hadn't already been to. But yeah, remote teaching English jobs, you you'll see a lot on Facebook and on social media, and it will advertise really low rates, maybe $5 an hour, something like that. And yeah, a lot of these, I don't think that's the best way to get into that kind of thing. Uh, you should really do your research on this so you don't end up with a dodgy English school. But there are places where you can earn about $12 an hour as a average. So
Mhm.
that's a little bit closer to, well, it's fairly close to what the minimum wage was in the UK. So that's more of a stable sort of job, and that's more the start rate that you want to be looking at, if I'm honest.
Mhm. Sure.
And if you set up your own English institution, then you can practically make double that because you're cutting out the middleman. I guess the hard part
Mhm.
there is you just need to find your own students. So maybe it's best to build up a good reputation with a company first and hope that you're a good teacher and word of mouth spreads, and yeah, just like that really.
Okay, definitely makes sense. Okay, I like it. So we'll make money online teaching English, and you don't have to make much, right? We're talking about 1,500, 2K a month, something like that, making money online, and you're totally content with that.
Yeah, so I mean, coming from the UK, and it's the same in other Western European countries or the US, we're lucky in that we earn a lot more than people in most countries do, which means average in the UK or the US is really, really cheap in Latin America or Southeast Asia, for example.
Hmm.
So even what we would consider a low wage back home, it goes a long way in this part of the world. So you
For
can
sure.
rent a place for $10 a day, food even less than that. I had lunch about an hour ago. About that was maybe $2 for just from a local Paraguayan family restaurant, just a couple of minutes from here. So
Nice.
that's the sort of money that you'll be spending. Transport generally.
The most expensive thing, I think, like, it's easy to live cheap when you're in a spot, but when you're moving a lot, like say over the next year, flights within Latin America can be pretty expensive. Even if you do buses, it'll
Yeah,
it'll add up as well as be uncomfortable. And then when you're only staying for 1 month or less, obviously accommodation's a lot more expensive, especially if you're staying less than a month. So I feel like that's what
yeah,
where a
definitely.
lot of the real expenses are. Is like, the fucking $500 flight, and you're like, shit, that's half my month, you know.
Yeah, I would say that you'd have to try and avoid flying wherever possible. unless you're in Europe where the flights are really, really affordable. Everywhere else, you should just use buses, trains, and yeah, as you say, it is pretty uncomfortable. So that is the sacrifice you have to make. Traveling, you can travel to a lot of countries on a budget, but you do have to sacrifice comfort a lot of the time to do that.
So are you gonna
And
bus it? Are you gonna try not to fly?
mostly, there will be areas where we do have to
Damn, it's
fly
a big continent, bro.
eventually.
You're gonna find out.
Yeah,
You're gonna find out. It's a big ass continent.
yeah. I mostly did buses last time. So, well, I flew from Panama to Colombia because obviously you can't get bus through the Darien Gap, which is a shame because that'd be a cool region to explore. But for obvious
Yeah.
reasons, that's not possible right now. And I think the only other flights I got in South America, I got one from Bogota to Quito because I was being lazy and it was a long way to go to the border. I got one to Easter Island, but yeah, that's something that if you're on a budget, you wouldn't do that. And I got a flight from Uruguay to Brazil because I was ill towards the end of my trip and had to change things around a lot. And yeah, as you
Mhm.
say, that was quite expensive. It was maybe $300 one way flight, Uruguay from Montevideo to Rio de Janeiro. Uh, but yeah, that wasn't part of the plan, but is what it is. But otherwise, yeah, long distance buses. Longest one I did last time was about 25 hours down from Bolivia to here in Paraguay. And yeah, certainly wasn't comfortable, but it's certainly a way to save money. Um, you are right to say that the costs do add up as you do this more and more. So I think it is better to target a small number of places that you really want to visit rather than trying to do every single
Mhm.
city or every single country in a short space of time. Because, yeah, it's maybe $30, $40 for a long distance bus. And then you do that 10 times, you do it 50 times. Suddenly you're looking at a lot of money here. So you do
Mhm.
need to get that balance right. It is wise to spend a few days or a couple of weeks or even a month or so based in one area and try and take local buses where you can. It's not such a thing for long distance transport. You'll generally end up on the tourist buses, which are the more expensive ones. But if you can get local buses and you look after your belongings, then yeah, it's quite easy to get around.
I will say though, a bus in the Andes is not a normal bus. It's not the same as going for a bus ride in Europe. A bus in the
No,
Andes
definitely not.
is like a it's like a harrowing journey where the hairs on the back of your neck are sticking up as you look out the window and you're like, holy shit, like if we if the brakes stop working or something, like we are dead. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be a little bit dodgy at times, a little bit bumpy, as you say. And yeah, they're not always the best experiences. It's quite common in this part of the world, unfortunately, for people to go on a bus and play loud videos for 12 hours straight without putting headphones in. So that is not ideal on a sleeper bus.
That's the Latin
I've had
hammer.
people throwing up on buses. Yeah, the Latin hammer. I've heard that phrase before, and even last night I was trying to work in peace in reception in a hotel here, and there was some guy playing loud music on his phone for no good reason. Even left his phone unattended at times just to seemingly annoy me. But there you go. That's something you got to get used to out here.
Latin hammer. So tell me one thing. How did you convince your Paraguayan girlfriend to come on this adventure with you?
So, well, I met her when I first came to Paraguay 2 years ago, and we've got a lot in common in terms of both loving to travel and both wanting to see a lot of the world. She's not so much into seeing every country, but she would like to see a fair chunk of the world. We were talking just an hour ago about maybe after this trip, our next one should be Central Asia, which will be really, really cool. That's a part of the world that really high on my bucket list, and she's
Hmm.
really keen on that as well. But I think we both have the same goals really in terms of make money online, scale from there, uh, make more and more, and then just live a full time life at travel for the foreseeable future.
That's it. That's how it's done. I like it. And what was the discussion like? Did you have to talk to her parents? Did you have to?
Well, I haven't actually met her parents yet. I'm going to do that for the first time this week, so that'll be an interesting discussion to have. Uh, so we'll
So
just
you're
have
gonna
to,
say, "Hey, nice to meet you. By the way, I'm whisking your daughter away for a year."
yeah. Can't say I'm looking forward to that conversation too much, but hopefully it goes well. Her parents seem like they'll be nice people, so hopefully it doesn't go too bad.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely chill people. They're cool about it because I think in the West, at least in the USA, meeting the parents is like this experience where the dad's kind of mean mugging and he's kind of like, "What are your intentions with my daughter?" Where in Latin America, it's a little bit like that, but in like a good old school formal way. But it's also just he might say like, "You want a beer?" and just like bro it up and not try to like come from this like authority frame. So uh, I think it's overall a more chill experience in Latin America.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like her dad is quite a welcoming person, so he's more the sort of person that will offer the barbecue and things like that rather than
Yeah,
be
yeah.
loud or hostile. But also, she had never left Latin America until a year ago, and then we
Hmm.
just suddenly decided, why don't we just do a month in Southeast Asia together? And that went really well. So we spent a month in Bali, the Philippines, and Malaysia. A couple of days in Jakarta as well, which wasn't so interesting, but she's had her first little taster of going across the world there. So it's not a brand new thing to spring on her parents. But yeah, as I say, I hope it goes well.
Epic. And so tell me a little bit more about the game plan for every country in the world. What are some of the big logistical challenges that people need to keep in mind for an undertaking like this?
The biggest issue that every country traveller comes across is visas. There are countries that change their rules all the time. Fortunately, having a British passport is really good for most countries. We're one of the top passports in the world. I think sixth or seventh last time I looked. Maybe it's changed now, but it's easy to get visa-free access or visas on arrivals to most country. Sorry, to most
Hmm.
countries, and that's the same for most Western tourists. They come from countries with powerful passports, which does cut out that hurdle. Although
Hmm.
there will be times where we do have to apply for visas, and it will be a lot trickier. I know that Africa is a bit of a logistical nightmare for that one, but the biggest problem right now for every country is, well, it's not even a visa situation really. It's getting into North Korea, which shut the borders early 2020 for COVID. So, and just today I saw something that they are indicating that they might be opening up in December this year. But even then, there's no indication that it'll be for Western tourists, and they certainly favour their friends from Russia and China. So I think people from those countries have more favourable chance to get into North Korea. Previously, there were people who would basically cheat and they would fly to South Korea and do a tour of the joint security area in the demilitarized zone, which is where you could step across the border and you could legally go into North Korea, cross their border, but only inside a hut. You couldn't go any further than that. And for some bizarre reason, Guinness World Records counts that as a visit to North Korea. I mean, I don't like that idea. It would be a cool place to go, but to actually visit North Korea, for me, that's going to Pyongyang, or if you're really lucky, being able to see somewhere else in the country. And as of now, that's not possible. The JSA, that's not been possible since last July after an American soldier ran across the Korea border. So all tours have shut down there as well. So if you are looking to go to every country right now, at this moment in time, it's not possible. But things do change all the time. Some countries open up. Saudi Arabia was infamous as one of the hardest countries to get a visa for a few years ago. Now
Mm,
it's really, really easy. I was on a bus from Jordan a couple of years ago, got visa on arrival. Don't think they had many Western tourists coming over the land border, so they were a bit confused to see me there, traveling on my
mm,
own. But after a couple of hours, and yeah, I hope I didn't hold up the bus too long, but they gave the visa and it was really easy. So Saudi is a country that got a lot easier. Libya is a country that in recent years only offered visas to business tourists. Sorry, not even tourists, business visitors. You couldn't go there as a tourist. You'd have to pretend you were going on business, which was a very difficult thing to do. You needed connections, you needed a good cover story, and you needed to hope that if you got interrogated at the airport, then you weren't going to get busted as a spy or something, which is something that happens to, well, occasional journalists. You had the chap in Russia recently who was just released about a week or so ago. I think he was a journalist. He went there, I'm not really sure what he was doing, but a lot of countries don't like journalists. And if you're a blogger or a YouTuber and you've got camera equipment on you, then that could raise a few alarm bells. So you do need to be a little bit careful with that. But yeah, visas are the biggest logistical challenges. And there are also some tricky regions. Caribbean is one to a lesser extent, but also the Pacific Islands, really hard because you've got very few flights out there. The flights you do get are really, really expensive, very few accommodation options. The whole, every country is expensive, every flight is expensive, literally looking at thousands of dollars to do these few tiny countries where you might spend a few days max and there isn't loads to do in that region of the world. If you love beaches, great, but is it really worth spending all that money just to see a nice beach when you can do that in the Maldives or the Caribbean or even Southern Europe? So but yeah, Pacific region is certainly one of the trickier ones, and
mm.
Africa, West Africa in particular, is known for being a logistically challenging region. Lots of
Yeah.
instability, lots of corruption. The Sahel region, you've got lots of war, terrorism. Mali in particular is becoming more and more dangerous as time goes on. Burkina Faso has gone downhill in recent years.
Mm,
Chad is a little bit safer than those two, but it's also not the easiest country to do. So, yeah, if you do this, it's easy in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, it's easy in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. But once you get to Africa, the Pacific Islands, those are a lot more difficult. Parts of Asia, uh, obviously there's a lot going on now with Israel, Iran. You never know what's going to happen there. So you've just got to take windows of opportunity, really. Some countries, they'll open up for a short time, then they'll close again. Uh,
hmm
or even not just countries, but places as well. So, an example of somewhere I went just in the right time was Chernobyl. Went there in Ukraine, August 21, and about, what was it, 5, 6 months later, obviously, the war in Ukraine spread across the country. The Russians took over Chernobyl. I don't know if it's safe there, even if you can find a tour, which I somehow doubt at this point in time. But yeah, if you see somewhere in a country that's a little bit unstable, the best time to go is now. Again, I went to Taiwan last year. You don't know what's going to go happen with China. Maybe nothing. Maybe something really bad. But do these places whilst you're still able to. And yeah, Myanmar's another one, bit dodgy. Go there now while you can, because next week, who knows, they might just close their borders and you never know when they open again, or they just introduce new visa rules, make it really tricky.
Definitely makes sense. I mean, it's the same thing on the residency and citizenship side. It's like get the residency while you can because you never know when things are going to change, and they usually make it harder.
Yeah,
So,
never easy.
what about languages? Are you trying to learn French and Spanish and Arabic and languages to help you in your journey?
I mean, when you're going to every country, obviously it's very tricky to learn every language. You just don't have enough hours in the day to do that. You do try and learn the basics before going to each place. Hello, how can I order something at a
Right.
restaurant?
But if you learn the six UN languages, you'd cover so
Mm,
much territory because French is 30 countries, Spanish is 30
yeah,
countries, Russian's what, 15 countries, something like that. Arabic's 20 plus countries. So I feel
yeah,
like that's how I would do it is I would focus on maybe regions at a time and learn the language and go deep on the language for that immersion period.
yeah, definitely. I am trying to learn Spanish. It's been taking a lot longer than I was hoping for. I'm not a natural, to be honest. So it's and after 2 years outside Latin America, it has gone quite rusty now. So I'm just beginning to pick it up again. But Spanish is a big one because that covers almost every country from Mexico down to Argentina. Obviously, the big
Hmm.
exception is Brazil, where it's Portuguese that you need to know. But
Hmm.
the other key language, if you want to go to every country, is French, because
Hmm.
in most parts of, well, many parts of Africa, they speak French. So, and Africa is a place where you need to be able to communicate, make your points clearly, and try and get out of any situations that might arise. So, it is quite
Yep.
important to have someone who speaks good French with you. So, I would say that's a very important language to learn for this particular journey. Uh, as for the other languages, as you say, Russian, Arabic, yes, they're spoken in quite a few countries, but the Middle East in particular, you can generally get by quite easily just by speaking English. They do
Hmm.
speak English in most countries there, a lot more than I was expecting when I first got to the region. And then
Hmm.
obviously lots of people go to the UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. So it's really easy there. Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain to a lesser extent. Even Saudi Arabia, it wasn't as hard as I was expecting. So yeah, I'd say if you can learn every language, great. But if you have to focus on one or two, focus on Spanish and French. Those are the ones that will really help you cover a good chunk of the world.
Yeah, and easy as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that definitely makes sense. What about packing? Do you try to do carry on only? What's your kind of luggage setup? What are some of your best things that you pack that most people forget about?
So I think I've done what most experienced travelers do. And on their first big trip, they'll buy a massive backpack that's just about the same size as them. And they'll have a backpack on their front as well, a smaller one. And to be honest, that's far too much stuff. It's a lot of hassle to carry it around. And when you do need to catch flights, you need to pay a lot to carry your bag. If I took my
Hmm.
big bag, check bag to Paraguay with me this week, it would have cost about $110 just for one bag. So I would say pack a lot less in terms of clothes. You can easily find places just about anywhere where someone will wash your clothes for you. And it's very, very cheap. You're looking at maybe $2 to $5 a time. And this is pretty much universal. It's not specific to any particular region. There's always people who wash your clothes for money. Um,
Right.
so
And so
limit the
sorry, what's
clothes
the
you bring.
tip that you just don't need as much clothes as you think because you can wash it easily?
Yeah, you'll need maybe four or five pairs of clothes max, and then the rest should be filled with practical stuff like phone chargers. You do need one of the most annoying things about Latin America is that you have to pack for all weathers. So if you're going to the Middle East, you know you're not going to need your gloves, your hat, your scarf. And if you're going to
Hmm.
Siberia, then you won't need your shorts and everything. But Latin America is a bit of everything, so it's a little bit trickier to squeeze everything in. But
Right.
bring a thin jacket and a thin jumper as well. You will need them, but if you stack up and wear several layers, then you should be okay. Uh, but yeah, try and maximize the size of your hand luggage. So the measurements vary by airline, but it's generally about 55 centimeters by 40 something. But I can't remember the other one. But just do your research on that and try and get the biggest bag possible to squeeze as much stuff in. I know a lot of people are a fan of packing cubes, which is where you condense clothes into a small space. I haven't tried them myself, but many people vouch for them, so maybe that's a good idea as well. Just fold your socks in together and roll your clothes up tight to really maximize space. And yeah, I like to have my big bag, which carries the majority of my stuff I won't use all the time. So obviously, I won't be wearing all my clothes at once, but also a day rucksack where I have my phone chargers, drinks bottle. I always bring a filtered water bottle, which is quite important outside of the Western world, really, because you don't have to buy water everywhere you go. You can just drink from the tap water, which, if you do that without a filtered bottle, it can make you very ill, especially places like India, which is pretty notorious for it. But if you have a filtered bottle, you can drink as much tap water as you want. I've never had any
Hmm.
problems with that, even in India. It
So
was,
if the water filter's like in the bottle,
yeah,
part of the bottle,
yeah, so you
okay.
can screw the filter onto the inside of the lid, and then when you drink through the bottle, the water will go through the filter. Um, yeah, it's really really good. Never had anything go wrong with this, so it's certainly something I'd recommend. Uh,
Random question: what do you do with the bottle then when you go through the airport? Because
so
it's like you can't really have it in your hand, but if you have it in your
yeah,
bag and it's empty, it's taking up like a huge amount of space. So sometimes when I used to travel with the water bottle, I don't because I lose it every time, but I would like put like socks in it or something like that just to like because I
yeah.
can't have this like empty thing, you know what I mean?
I would say a lot of bags have pockets on the outside, so your bottle can
Yeah.
effectively be an extension of your bag. And I also
Yeah, yeah.
use carabiner locks, which I put on the outside, and I often hang my hiking boots from there. And yeah, I haven't been called up on that before. I think I am pushing it a little bit when I go through airport security because obviously that makes my bag a little bit bigger. But I always hold the bag separately as if it's a personal item, and then hook my shoes back on when I get through security. And that's always worked well so far. I mean, it's luck really. It depends on what airline you go with, who's working there on the day, how much they care about their job, and how much they care about how much you bring on. Most airline staff don't really care that much if you go a little bit over. I was over in Mongolia with the weight by about 5 kilos, and she just said, "Oh, it's fine, don't do it again." So most airline staff
Good.
are fine if you go a little bit over, but it is a risk, and the rules are that you're not meant to do that. So you should always be aware that if you're unlucky, you can face a big fine for that of maybe up to $100 to check stuff in.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely makes sense. I know there's so many small logistical challenges. I think being a good planner and organizer is such an important part, obviously, of
Mm.
this mission to go to every country in the world. So you got to be really good with being a good consumer and buying flights and Airbnbs and um, I guess you kind of become you got to keep up to date, right? Because if this is a 10-year journey, what works now might not work 2 3 years from now. Maybe there's something better that comes out, like a better portal for booking hotels or who knows, right? So, and
Yeah.
the gear, I'm always updating the gear too
Oh,
and
yeah.
trying to make things lighter for one thing. But yeah, so it's really interesting, man. I mean, we try to get a lot of people on the podcast that are going to every country. Maybe you've heard of the Counting Countries podcast hosted by Rick Gazarian. So
Oh, yeah.
shout out to Rick. He's a previous podcast guest as well. And yeah, man, I wish you all the best of luck with your journey. Hope you enjoy Paraguay. Good
Thank
luck
you.
with the meeting the parents this week. I mean, you'll have already met the parents by the time this episode comes out. So uh, we'll see what happens. But what final message do you want to share with the audience? Kind of take this time and give a shout out again to your website and all that other good stuff.
So, yeah, my website is Adventure to Every Country, and I'm trying to share helpful tips If you want to do the same, it's a long process because I'm one person and it takes several days to write a post. So it's a lot of work, and it's, well, nearly 1 year old. My first few posts were not very good, to put it lightly, but I have started to pick up since January and make some hopefully useful content which people seem to appreciate. But if you do want to go to every country, I would say target regions one at a time. Try and make time to stick to one area, because
Hmm.
obviously, if you fly to Thailand, it makes sense to then go to Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, and so on, rather than doing those all as separate trips. So that will save you a lot of money in the long term. Same with Latin America. If you've got the time, go to Mexico, uh, go all through Central America, and try as much of South America as you can. And yeah, that's it really.
Sweet. Well, this has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Again, our guest today, Alex from adventuretoeverycountry.com. Thank you to Alex for joining us. Thank you to the audience for listening. And remember, please subscribe on YouTube, X, Apple, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any podcast player that you listen to podcasts on. We are there. Please subscribe. We launch 2 episodes a week, and you won't want to miss an episode with any of our amazing guests like Alex. Ciao for now.
Thank you for having me on. Take care.
Hey guys, quick note at the end of the episode here. If you made it this far, you might be interested in working with My Latin Life personally to make progress on your internationalization plan. So whether the next step for you is getting residency in Latin America, lowering your taxes, choosing the best country, maybe a little birth tourism, whatever the next step is for you, of course, My Latin Life can help. We've helped people in their 20s, their 40s, their 60s, because I truly believe that Latin America has something to offer people at every stage of life. So if you want to become our VIP client, if you want to work with Vance, myself directly, book a call. There will be a link in the description. There will be a small fee for the initial consultation, and we do that to filter out the time wasters and focus on the best of the best clients. But if you're listening to this podcast and you made it all the way through the episode, I know you're the best of the best. But we're ready to work with you. So book that call. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the My Latin Life podcast, and we'll catch you in the next one.